I have an idea. Let's make it orky. That's right. The finger stays out because you and me are going to make it orky today. And yes, I'm aware that that is also a person and I enjoy her content. So, this video, it ran very long, so I'm not going to take a lot of time here. Let's just get into it. Suffice to say that this beast Snagga Boss is part of a larger project, a unit entry for an upcoming painting competition. Can you guess which one? So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Talk about it afterwards.
Right, let's have a go. First, I'll be base coating me war boss.
The model is very complex. There's a lot of different chunks and areas to this model, so I want to sort of dissect him. I'll just lay down a series of base coats, working from the inside out. So, starting with his skin, which is a mixture of deep ocean green and German camo green. That gives me a nice bluish green, and yeah, the head is not attached. Bust off the arm so I can get underneath everything. We'll jump back after I've got my base coats laid out. So that's it so far. With the base coat laid in place, I can now start breaking pieces off and getting them rendered up. First of all, I'd like to move from the inside out. I'm going to work from the lowest level of the sculpt in order to cover my tracks, as I'm laying down this green that's tucked inside of everything. If I happen to get a little bit outside of the lines, as they say, no problem. I apologize as well. I know my voice might seem a little off. I am back from Las Vegas Open, and yeah, I'm down with the sickness. But that's fine for painting. So, anyways, that's the sound of my voice. You can see now I'm working the skin up, and I'm going to be working from a cold to a warm kind of style with this. Green is an especially versatile color, and you saw me previously starting from that German uniform mixed with deep ocean blue. And now I have that same mixture, but a little heavier on the German uniform. And I'm being pretty broad with this first batch of highlights. And especially because he's an orc, I can afford to be a little rough with things. Only a little. Let's remove that head. And with all of these areas, I'm just going to say this now so it doesn't become redundant. I'm laying down multiple layers of each color. It's possible to, create a gradation just through the saturation. Just laying multiple layers over each other in smaller and smaller amounts. You can get a gradient going that way. And this is for a contest. I'd like it to be a showpiece or exhibition quality. So every small step is going to be laid on in multiple coats. I'd also like to talk about and share the progression. You have deep ocean blue from the Fanatic range, German uniform lime green from Vallejo model color, and Baron Dune up at the top here. And you can see me just working my way around through these mixtures, taking that deep ocean blue and German uniform mixture, slowly adding the lime green to it, and then capping things off with a combination of Baron Dune and lime green. I will possibly add a small amount of white into that as I get into some of the finer areas like the faces and knuckles, etc. But I just want to show you what my progression looks like and the steps I'll be moving through. Sam Lens here, back again, WOG. See, I'm getting a little bit lighter and brighter. I just wanted to call out this stage because You run into things like this on textured surfaces, like the center of his forehead, right? It has many, many wrinkles, and I have many colors I'd like to lay in place. But if the center of his forehead is shaded down to the absolute darkest tone available, as well as every other area, I lose a little bit of control over the volume. Generally, the upper facing of his head would be much brighter. So I'm making sure to not to get too lost in the textures. So I'm making sure that I don't get too lost in the textures. Also, at this point, I've just switched down to a smaller brush, just to kind of pull my eyes a little bit closer, give me a sharper touch on things. But you can see it's progressing very gradually. Just focusing on the saturation with each color, as I was saying previously. But once that is all laid in place, I can move in with some pure lime green. And this is when you get to see a lot of pleasing action. This lime green is fairly warm and it bounces nicely off of the blue shadows in comparison to them. You can see me pulling out some of these much smaller textures. He has some warts and such. Give those all a very small touch of a highlight. Now I'm, breaking into a much sharper target, much smaller areas. As I get to my brighter tones, this is when I really separate things sharply. I like a nice broad shadow mid-tone area, and then capture a lot of action in the upper kind of 15%, 20% of that surface. So let me continue chopping away with this lime green. There's a lot of this orc to get across. And as I'm working away, I just also want to share the importance. I was talking a lot about areas more exposed to the light, harsh lighting, leaving certain areas off or touching with just the slightest amount of paint. That's where this really comes into play. And I know that the jaw is going to be seated behind the power jaw. He's got the standard iron gob, the symbol of command in the orc army. So I can leave that a little undone and let it recede. Just pick out some very fine textures, make him look aged, a little extra wrinkly. I enjoy the scar going across his two cheeks. Nice move. So let me keep working this fella up. Then we'll come back and see what else I can slice away. Well, what do we have here? The bad boss is back. You can see I've done a lot more working around on him. I'm just kind of trying to find my footing. It's such a complex model. There's so many different materials and potential colors on it. I found it confusing to look at, so I just wanted to lock some base coats in. Allow me to behead thy king. You can see I've got these horns worked up. A little more work to go on those, but I wanted to talk about how that came together. So, first of all, over a base coat of thornwood green, I'll bring some more into play, covering about half of the horn. Then I'll grab some guncore brown. And yep, you guessed it. It's kind of covering the upper half with this lighter color. I can leave the bottom side, that can be a little darker. We'll wet blend these two colors together. And just make sure you sink the paint into these crevices. The model has a lot of texture sculpted onto it, but I don't want deep black lines next to the lighter area. You can see on the back side, I'm correcting this mistake that I've made. This is too dark for my liking compared to up here where I've started to lay guncore brown in the crevice. It gives it more of that lift and brightness as things come closer to the socket. All right, hurry up and dry. Back in action. Just have to give that a moment to seal itself to the surface. Go back with more guncore brown. You can see I'm just saturating and fortifying this tan area. Just licked the brush, and I'll do a little bit of sponging to create the blend. Just absorbing up some of that excess paint. And we wait for it to dry. One more time. Okay, I like that. Let's go in with more guncore brown. I like to lighten things up to an ivory, but I want to continue using wet blending, just in small portions. So you see I have that wet edge up top. I sponged up the area leading into the darker thornwood green. I can pull a small sphere-like shape into place right up here near the base of the horn. I may refer to it as a tusk in the future for the sake of word economy. I get bored hearing myself say things about the horn, the horn, the horn over and over again, so I could probably edit that part out. But here we go. A little black added in to the thornwood green. Just going and feathering things out using very light amounts of paint. Just remember, when you're creating a blend in this way, that first layer is going to be pretty insignificant, but it is the foundational soil for the following layers to be grabbing on and attaching to. So you can go a little thicker after this, only a little. But yeah, just laying a thin layer of grip tape down for the other pigments to hold on to. Alright, a little more saturation up at the top, pulling Barren Dune into play from the Army Painter Fanatic range. Laying down a very thick and heavy amount. I plan on doing just one more wet blend. So, Barren Dune in place. Guncore brown one more time. I just licked the brush. Gotta fall back on my old habits. I want this to be perfect. Sometimes it's just in case. I wouldn't say brush licking is a necessity, but I found I developed it on instinct, out in the trenches. Time for some gentle layering. So I have some diluted Barren Dune on my brush. I'm just holding it still here so you can get a sense. See how much paint is on the brush? Going in with a very, very small amount. And this is how you feather. Just placing it in the area where I'd like it to be the brightest, and then sweeping away but towards my target. That's how I gently lay down the many smooth layers. Acrylics, you're diluting the paint, so you're adding transparency to it at the exchange of a smoother coat. So you're going to need a few more layers to really push this home. I like to tell my students, keep the rule of threes in mind. If you're a long-time watcher of these videos, you've heard this, but it's a good reminder that you want to lay down at least 3 coats of paint before you decide things aren't looking smooth enough, before you want to turn back and start over. I think you'll see after 3 layers that the paint begins to develop. You'll add many more, but you'll get an encouraging view by just sticking it out a little bit and adding 3 layers. And the same philosophy applies to this darker area. Want it to appear as a darkened horn as the keratin grows out, becomes darker. You can see this, what I'm after on this take, but keep in mind that this horn is severed, so it will not be quite the amount of black developing. It'll just be more of a hint compared to the full horn. So, by that notion, I'll bring a little Guncore Brown into play. Push more mid-tone in there. Could probably have a little fun here too. Let's take, a thin glaze-like consistency, the Guncore Brown. Same deal with the Baron Dune. And look at that. I can wet blend glaze-like consistencies. It is possible. It's not easy. But you just saw it. So impossible is not a word that's going to describe this. It just takes some practice. Back again, tightening our hold on completion. So down towards the tip of the horn, I have some tidal blue mixed in with black. I want it to appear, the material that the horn is made from is a semi-satin material. Just like your fingernails in real life have a slight shine to them. So it's always nice to bring a reflection into play. Have the horns kick up to a reflection, as you can see on this rear horn that's coming along. So you're building up to the color white, and the fun thing with white is everything leading up to it is an off-white. It's the brightest color you have available. So now it has me thinking in these off tones. And generally I like to, when I'm pulling my horns out and producing a reflection, I go with a turquoise or a blue tone like you're seeing here. It works well for Nurgle and Orc models, little rougher, more decayed horns. It gives that look, at least in my opinion. And I'll be pulling some texture into play up top. See, I'm just dragging some very soft lines downwards, lifting my brush away from the surface at the end to give me a sharp line. Apologize, I didn't record the very start of this process because I forgot to turn the microphone on. But here we are. You can see how it's done, just many thin lines, and I may want to drop back down into a closer match as I move down the horn. I can pull the Guncore Brown back into play, or mixtures of Guncore Brown and the Baron Dune, just like so. So it's a bit of a mix and match, and just pull these textures into play until I'm happy, until everything looks rendered enough. And blending isn't off the table at this point either. You're kind of enveloping the surface. You can smooth things out. You can lay these scratchy lines out, blend them back down, submerge them deeper into the surface. Makes things look all the more natural. You're just kind of rolling it back and forth, rendering, and just deciding when you're satisfied. So I'll keep working away on that, but what I'm going for is that moment when I can add these final white tiny dots and slashes. Very tiny. I'm going to take a minuscule amount of paint on my brush. Try to lay in my sharpest lines. Look at that crumb of paint on the end of the bristles. It happens when you're working with very small amounts. You can bring a little bit of water into play. But I'll just be chopping away and layering these textures and blends up. We'll have a look at the next stage. Okay, that fateful moment when the jaw was attached. I got the head in place finally. After doing the bones, I can finally situate the iron gob over the teeth. So now I want to go back in and just give the skin a little more rubbing. I've got white mixed with lime green. You can see I'm laying it down in just the slightest amounts, trying to pick out as much of this soft texture as I can. Get these, there's like a tiny vein running down his forehead, all these orky wrinkles going up and down the face. Give a good amount of dimension to all of those with this final touch. Well, final touch before the wash. Let me get this laid in place. A new challenger arises. You can see me just sliding a very thin coat of green tone over everything, just making sure to work against that wet edge and just give me a little bit more depth. I'll let that sit and dry and then give it one more kick up. Okay, coming back in, you heard me already call my shot in the last step, so yes, it's a little bit more of that white and lime green mixture will be applied. Everything's been dropped down very slightly beneath the wash, so now I want to pick out the peaks once again. Well, look at this yellow fellow. I'm going to be working up the armor plates, mainly the yellow portions. It's a bit of a process, and again, the model it's got a lot of surface area and textures to get through, so let me first kind of demonstrate how I was creating the yellow progression. We'll get into some more detailed things, but first you see me laying down a base coat of black mixed with scrag brown. It's black from the Fanatic range and scrag brown from the Citadel range. Now I'm going in with some pure scrag brown. And you can see, I'm just kind of gradually lightening things as the area moves upwards towards the sun, the imagined light source, whatever is illuminating him from the top. That's where I'm leading to, but he has a lot of fun textures to be paying attention to. Definitely want to start carving this heavy line in right from the start. I can go in there with just some remains of paint on my brush, just feather those around. Done just a couple layers now. Let that settle and dry. Next up, here I am adding a little bit of scrag brown combined with demonic yellow from the Fanatic range. I know he's a mishmash, but I started this a long time ago, so I didn't have the full Fanatic range at the time. I want everything to match when it's all done. You can see now it's leading up into a yellow direction, and this is a great way to do yellow in general. And there's a few different philosophies about which color to undercoat it with, etc. And yellow is generally known, it's a tricky color. It's a little difficult to work with. The pigments can be a little large, even after they're ground up. It can run a little thin. Colors just generally vary a little bit. And I find that yellow isn't so hard when I'm mixing so many accent tones in with it. When I use a pure yellow, that becomes a little bit difficult. But using a sturdier, more dependable color as you're working up, just mixing that in kind of grants my yellowing progression a little bit of that nature that makes it easier to work with. I have to let this settle and dry. I don't want to overdo it here. Okay, I'll dry it out. Let's continue to work it up. You can see, just through the saturation, just through, not completely covering the previous layer, even if I'm working with one color, building up a gradient. Pick out those little nubs, the rivets, reline that deep edge. But yeah, I'm working in a compact area, the tendency to overdo it and tear my paint up before it's had a chance to truly dry. I do run that risk. I just want you to know that in the video, ordinarily I'm jumping around. I have this faint amount of paint on my brush. I'll just continue smoothing out the model. in practice, it's more of a jump around, so you're not just ripping paint off of your model. Okay, dried and complete. I added a few more layers onto that, but it's nothing that... Okay, dried and complete. I added a few more layers onto that, but it's nothing that you're not going to see right about now. So let's take a small amount of pure demonic yellow, and just start working it up in a very small area. Kind of place it, push it towards your target area. You can see the top of the shoulder. I have brighter to go on that, and it's much more exposed to the light, so I really try to hammer in those mid-tones. I haven't gone to pure demonic yellow up there yet, but that's why the front side of the shoulder doesn't need to be as bright. I want some dramatic lighting going on. So the first layer usually is a little rough looking, but as we know, it plants the seeds, the little bits of grip tape for the following layers to grab onto. Now, coming back in for another layer. Just go very light with it, a very small, controllable amount. With these Fanatic paints in particular, they pack a lot of pigment, so when you're going into feather, you may find that you need a lot less paint than you are used to with some of those other brands. It's a small variation. I got used to it, after just playing with it for a little while. But just know that if you're having any of those coffee stains or tide lines, it's because there's a little more pigment density in these paints. And returning for the third layer, seeing that rule of threes in action. It's a slow improvement. I mean, relatively. We are talking about seconds of time, so I guess my definition of slow might vary from yours. Pick those rivets out. Pay attention to these. I kind of want to get some of these hard lines. I want it to look rough and bent and, very metal. Get as much texture and hard lines in as I can, because it's very suiting for the orky attitude. A very hard line group. All right, another layer. Just I want to make sure to tuck that yellow in. A lot of textures to manage on this fella. Oh yeah, nice and smooth. Still have a little more to go in the way of treating his smoothness. Let's get some pure demonic yellow, and this patch right here, I think that can just be completely yellow, and that's cool. Alright, I think the high side is looking well, but we can kind of envelop our gradient, dropping a little bit of the darkness down low. It's the same motion, same concept as the highlights, but just filtering your shadows down with a little diluted shadow tone. There are certain areas where you're going to return back to that, original black and scrag brown mixture. I'll use it very sparingly up top on the skull, but there are going to be some areas down low, right down here. I want to get some volume control going on. So generally the model will be a lot darker and have heavier shadows as the eye leads downwards, so kind of saving that deepest depth of tone that'll be a lot more prevalent on the lower part of the body, the undersides. It's got a lot of shadows to be examined and cast and played around with. What fun. So I've got a lot of yellowing, a lot of my brightest yellow to lay in place. That's just the pure demonic yellow. But it goes in very well, as you can see, after all that foundational work. It just looks so nice sitting in those brightest areas. But I want to get this bright yellow worked up before the next stage. So we'll edit away the next few hours, probably. And yeah, we'll come back when this guy has his yellow all blended up. Hi there, Sam Lenz, just checking in. How you doing? Yeah, I've got the yellow laid in. That looks nice, but finding the need to mix a little bit of white in with the yellow. Just want, one more jump up in this progression. I planned on highlighting it further after some battle damage, but it is needed now. You can see, what it's added to the overall piece. You can zone in on some of the edge highlighting, see how that's gradiating. I'm still cleaning things up and working it along, but I didn't want to leave this little fact out that, yeah, I've brought a little bit of white in with that demonic yellow because, yeah, things needed a little kick up before I start getting so hairy with the battle damage. So let me just knock some of this out, and we will continue on. All right, looking deadly. Now we have the sponge. I've added a little bit of water to some black, just so it will release off the sponge more easily. Probably should have waited until I painted the reds, but the kind of step-by-step nature of tutorials can kind of put things in a different order than you may normally approach. You can see I'm just very gently, laying in a tasteful amount of chips in the paint. Just very, very subtle. You don't want to go too crazy with it because each one of these pieces you're going to have to do some painting on it. You're going to have to highlight every little piece of battle damage. Now I'll go in there and wherever I can fit it, taking some gunmetal, laying that down inside of all of these black marks. If you can't fit your brush inside of that black mark, don't worry about it. Then the battle damage isn't, deep enough to expose any of the metal underneath. I'll just pick out some of these wider chips. Okay, delight, de gorgeous, de groovy. Pay attention to this color right here. That's that original base coat of black mixed with scrag brown. I'm going to take that and combine it with some sepia ink from FW. Now I'll take a very diluted amount. Look at my dirty thumb. I was recording this and forgot to turn the microphone on. Take a little off. Yeah, all I'm seeking to do is lay down a thin candy coating, just unifying all those blends, lightly seeping into the crevices. Mamma mia, it's so smooth. Yeah, we're just going to give this an all over candy coating. And while I'm at it with this color, a little bit of efficiency coming into play. Woohoo! It sits very well on top of all the bone areas. Very, very thin. Just make sure that it's not pooling up. You see, if I sweep it up in the wrong direction, it's going to pool up in this lighter area. Kind of go, with the brush strokes, with the shadows, making sure you're just, you're not cutting any extra work out for yourself in the corrections step. Let me get this all wrapped up. Bossa Nova. Look at that yellow. How's that done? You can see I worked ahead on some areas, but also left a little bit to finish for your viewing pleasure. So I'm going in now with pure demonic yellow. I've got a very fine, tiny brush. You can see I'm trying to underline all of these tiny bits of damage, which is why I was trying to warn you in a previous stage, like every one of these bits of damage is going to need a little bit of a stitch up. But where it's appropriate, I'll be adding the demonic yellow, just keeping my volumes in mind. That front-facing area, a little more shadowed, but you can see as I move upwards and things are facing directly towards the sun. It's demonic white plus yellow. And just remember that even these tiny little edge highlights can still carry some gradation for you. I'll just be dropping a little bit of this very bright kind of banana yellow in place. Just pick out those rivets, add those superficial scratches and dents here and there because he's orky. Yeah, I'll keep cooking away on that and we'll see what's next. Wog. You can tell he's the boss because he's got the power claw. So let's set this up first, laying down a nice hefty base coat of deep gray. Let me just get that all slicked around, and we're just going to chop away the larger areas first with some wet blending. So I'll be grabbing Gray Castle. Just keep that top-down light source in mind. It might look a little rough at first, but that's okay. Orcs have very rough gear. Yeah, you can see, just pulling it all together, just mixing the paint right on the surface. If you watch my videos, you've seen a lot of wet blending at this point. But yeah, it's never hurts to have a refresher course. You can see it in action, just taking thick amounts of paint, sweeping them together on the model, and slowly balancing things out. Not in danger of losing any details under this heavy amount of paint. It still dries very thin. It's just a delicate coat of acrylic in the end. Just seems a little large for the surface it's being applied to. Just knock out some of these larger volumes. Yeah, buddy. You can see it's a very rough setup. Sometimes your wet blending is not done in one single pass. You can go back in there and add more layers of paint, more saturation, more damage and action. Oh yeah. Yeah, you can see the build up. It's wet blending is not a finishing technique. I wouldn't quite put it that way. Not for me anyways. But I can come back and keep working it up. There's nothing wrong with a second pass of this lovely approach. You can see how quickly it's getting things set up for me. So let me just keep kicking around, adding another pass, building it all up, and we will jump back. Okay, I like that. Now just going back in with some Gray Castle. I probably called it Castle Gray in some previous tips. We all make mistakes. You can see I'm just still going pretty broad with my application, but using a large brush to sweep things into place gives me a lot of control. Just notice how much paint is actually on the brush compared to the exposed bristles, because that's what's helping me feather. So I'll continue blocking things in. There's not much to it. Just take a small amount of paint and let yourself get carried away. If you're having trouble getting the same result as me, common problem is that you're using too much paint. Less and less. You might be surprised. Let me knock this stage out. The heat is on. All right. Moving right along. I'm now throwing down some Brain Matter Beige, and that's a fun color to be naming. But just slicing the pie, getting a little sharper and tighter with these peaks of light. And I want it to read overall as this kind of creamy white tone. So I can use this Brain Matter Beige somewhat sparingly. You can see it's kind of my, where I want to pick my battles of mid-tone and highlight. Leave the shadows out of the picture. See, it's my contender in those situations. Just this kind of upper segment right now is just a battle between Gray Castle, not Castle Gray, and brain matter beige. Don't think it'll, will it come into play down here? Yeah, just a little bit. Some of these corners, edges, they tend to produce a little bit more of a highlight. So I want to make sure that I sharpen those areas. Oh boy. Let me lick my brush and resuscitate the paint. And it still will have, somewhat broad effect on these smoother areas. Still want to be feathering that up where, I can kind of get away with being a little rougher and sharper in these areas that are just the gray castle and brain matter beige. And while I'm at it, I could wet blend them as well to speed things along. Sometimes the gentle layering can be a little bit tedious at certain points in the process. So just sweep it in place just like so. So let me keep on going, slowly working this brain matter up. Moving right along, I want to go in there with a finer tooth comb. You can see I've broken down to a smaller brush, using it to pick out some of these finer edges, the rivets. I'm still using Gray Castle, but just a little more focused than those previous passes would give me. Really kind of trying to work up some of the subtleties. It's might be a little hard to view on camera. It looks mostly like I'm just placing the paint in the areas that it's already been, but the saturation is the payoff. A little extra level of sharpness running around the rim of this eye, just lightening it slightly, picking out these nostril holes. I like that. Now on the bottom side, I've mixed a little bit of deep gray in with the Gray Castle. It's not going to show quite as light and bright as the upward facing angle, but it does need some tending to, needs some dimension added. So just stay on the subtle side. Mostly I want it to read as this kind of creamy gray, a warm gray tone. I suppose that could also be creamy. The heat is on. All right, moving right along. I'm now throwing down some brain matter beige, and that's a fun color to be naming. But just slicing the pie, getting a little sharper and tighter with these peaks of light. And I want it to read overall as this kind of creamy white tone. So I can use this brain matter beige somewhat sparingly. You can see it's kind of my, where I want to pick my battles of mid-tone and highlight. Leave the shadows out of the picture. See, it's my contender in those situations. Just this kind of upper segment right now is just a battle between Gray Castle, not Castle Gray, and brain matter beige. Don't think it'll, will it come into play down here? Yeah, just a little bit. Some of these corners, edges, they tend to produce a little bit more of a highlight. So I want to make sure that I sharpen those areas. Oh boy. Let me lick my brush and resuscitate the paint. Fresh cooking from Mama's oven. Adding more of that brain matter beige into place. And you can see I've skipped ahead only slightly. Just wanted to save you a little bit of the redundant footage. You can see I've stippled in some of that sponged battle damage, filled it in with some gunmetal, just like with the yellow armor. Now I'm pulling in some very fine scratches and scrapes, trying to detail best I can all those very small sponge marks. Of course, adding the superficial scratches as well. Devilry, magic, all is contained within this tome.
Behold my thumb. I've added dark tone and deep gray together, combined it with a healthy amount of water. And this is the make or break moment. Hold thy breath, traveler. Now let's just slick this. I didn't have a gray wash, so I made one. Just throwing a little bit of gray paint in with the already washable characteristics of dark tone. That got me right here. Not bad. So just slide this in. Feel free to use it like a glaze as I am here. As always, be pushing it with a little bit of intention. All right, and we're back into it. Prime time tapping hours. I just want to lay down some of these gentle touches. Just a little slice and a slide, like some very slight scrapes in place. There's a lot of damage to kind of pull up on. Honestly, that old mix the gray paint with the black wash thing, it didn't work out perfectly. So I'm having to retrace my steps a little bit, but I guess through my own stupidity, I've gotten myself into the position where more work must be applied, and that will result in a higher level of quality. What you are hearing is me coping in real time as I speak to myself and paint. So at least I will know things are going to be okay. I don't know. I'm running out of words here. So let me continue to paint. I'm just going to be laying some scratches on this old feller, and also bring just some slight indications of rust with that scrag brown. I haven't gone hard on any other rusty areas. I plan on bringing it onto the weapon. Cautionary tale: just don't lay it down too heavily. Keep in those areas where more moisture would gather, around the rivets and the crevices. I don't want to drag any long streaks down it, because I don't think this power claw is going to be left sitting in the rain long enough for the liquids to course down it. So just a little back and forth with those rusty tones, more brain matter beige. I think I'll be all right on this guy. What's that? Starting fights is fun? That's very toxic behavior. I hope you enjoyed this video. Yeah, he's not complete yet, but I like where it's going. He has a lot of overhang, a lot of real estate, a lot of various materials that I want to render properly. This is for a competition, so I really want to lavish the details into this piece. The beasts Snagga speak to me. Early on, when I was just learning Warhammer 40,000, when I was just a wee lad, the snakebite orcs were my first faction, and these are an updated version of that. The war paint, the feathers, the beast taming, the shamanistic side of orky culture. That's where I really found my groove, and I collected a lot of them. So to this day, I consider myself an orc player. They're always my first love. So every time I'm working on orcs, it connects me to the past. And so it's very nice to be, making another very prominent orky piece, something for the books, something for the future. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I wish I could have finished the model, but it is running a little bit long. I'll finish things up in a part 2. Feel free to let me know how you feel in the comments section down below. Ask questions. These videos are so you can learn. So asking questions facilitates more learning. So don't be afraid. Anything you'd like to ask, leave in the comments down below. But till we meet again down that chromatic trail, my friend, remain unchained, as always.